and welcome to our program. Today we are getting to know a little bit more about the project in the footsteps of the past. So the project created small stations about archaeological finds around Del.2. Now we are going to meet Nina from Museum Silkeborg and get to know a little bit more about it. Let's go. Who kept it? Sorry?
The conservator.
Is okay.
But we have.
Is that legal?
No, well, you wouldn't do that today, but it's many years ago, and then it's only a couple of years ago that we got a call from the daughter of the conservator saying that they had the toe of Toloman, and if we were interested in having it back, and of course we said yes, please. So because when he conserved the Toloman, it was very new. He didn't know how to go about doing it, so it was also kind of an experiment. Unfortunately,
and this was in the 50s, right?
Yeah. Toloman was found in 1950, and when he then did that, he focused on preserving the head, but he also tried to conserve the feet because they were also very well preserved. And apparently he did some experiments and cut off the toe and made some thin slices that he could then examine under the microscope. But he then, for some reason, also decided to keep the toe. And according to the daughter of the conservator, he was always wearing it in his pockets and putting it on the table when they were eating. And even the children sometimes brought it to school to show their friends.
So that's probably not in the best condition?
Well, it's well preserved.
Still?
But, yeah.
Okay.
You can see it at the exhibition.
So it doesn't really matter since
course.
It's already preserved.
Of course, it would have been better.
But how can? Okay, so since it's preserved, since that process happened already, what happens afterward is not as relevant. Like it still stays, right? Like what is the impact? Is it minimal? Is it like huge?
I think it depends on what you do about it.
In this case, for instance.
Well, it's still preserved, so apparently it was okay for him to walk around with it in his pocket, but I wouldn't recommend doing it.
Yeah, for sure.
So this is one of the main stations where we talk about the finds of the bug bodies. So in total 3 bug bodies were found, and a bug body. You know what a bug body is?
Is the ones that were found like in those specific circumstances, like that were preserved, like that.
Yeah, it means that you still have the body preserved because of the very acidic nature in the bark. You have still the skin, the hair. In case of taller man, even the inner organs were preserved. So you can actually meet these people today. Like at Museum Silkeborg, you can go and visit taller man, stand face to face with taller man, which is really amazing. So it's really incredible standing there and watching him. But it's also give us a lot of possibilities of finding out who he was, what did he eat, what kind of illnesses did he have, and so on. So they're very valuable for us as researchers because so much information can be, taken out from this body. Otherwise, we usually don't find, perhaps some bones, but in this part of the central Jutland, it's very rare that we have bones preserved. But here we have the entire body. So.
And what happened for that to happen? Like, what are the circumstances that led to that type of preservation happening?
Well, then we should go to the next station, but I don't know if you want to talk more about
okay, we can talk about it in the next station.
Because some of the questions regarding these bog butters is, of course, why did they end up here in the bog? Were they criminals that were executed, or what happened? And what we believe is that they were sacrifices, human sacrifices. So in the Iron Age, we know that wetlands were used for ritual activities. So we find a lot of clay vessels filled with food. We find braids that have been placed in the bog. We find valuable objects, wagons, and cauldrons, all these things. And so we know that wetlands were used for special things. And then we also find the humans. So in all over Northwest Europe, we find actually bog butters. And at least some of them we believe were human sacrifices, especially regarding taller man, because we can see what happened to him. So he was hung. He still, when he was found, he still had the string attached to his neck. So here you can actually see how he was found. He was lying as if he was asleep. He wore a skin cap, a belt, and then the hanging cord. And we know that he was probably brought down here to the area, and he was then hung, hanged or hung. Oh, I never remember. He was hanged.
I don't know either. It is okay.
Well,
that happens, yes.
And then they must have carried him into the bog.
Okay.
So what we know from the descriptions of how he was found and the stratigraphy, we can see that there were a lot of pits from peat cutting already from the Bronze and early Iron Age. And he was placed in one of these pits, and we can see, well, they must have closed his eyes and mouth, and there was a lot of care put into him being placed in the bog.
Also the position itself?
He was not just dumped in this. They were not just getting rid of this corpse. They were actually placing him with a lot of care. We think that's a very good indication that he was actually a human sacrifice. Also because at this time of the Iron Age, about 400 BC, people were not buried, they were cremated. So he was, just by being placed in the bog, he was treated differently than all other people.
Yeah. And why were they doing human sacrifices at that time? What is the theory, at least?
Well, we don't know why. It could have been because of illness or some kind of threats. We have, as I said, the intestines were well preserved in taller man. So we have We've just made a new study where we have analyzed the colon contents of Toloman to find out what he had been eating as his last meal. We found out that he had been eating some kind of porridge consisting of primarily barley, but also wheat seeds of pale Persicaria and flax. So that was the main ingredients. And then we also found out that he had been eating some kind of fish as well, fatty fish. So we can kind of reconstruct his last meal based on that, and actually make almost a recipe, because this was a really detailed study. Yeah. And what were you asking about?
About sacrifices, but
if that was
like, why were they doing it? Then you said that.
Okay. And then based on the analysis we had made, we could see that it was primarily consisted of barley, which was like 85% of the meal. If we calculated the nutrient contents of the meal, it was, like half the daily intake that you should have as a man his age. So it was actually a nice meal. So based on the meal, we cannot say that it was because of famine or something like that he was sacrificed. So we don't know why it happened, but something went wrong, and this was for them the most obvious way to try to deal with it by sacrificing him.
And you were mentioning the age. Do you happen to know his
He was
age?
around 40 years old when he died. Yeah.
Is that considered like old at that time?
It was probably quite old, but there are some difficulties in estimating the age of individuals based on, for instance, the bones. Previously we thought that the people died relatively early, but perhaps even people were living longer than originally thought. So there might also have been older people, but he was definitely a grown man at the time when he ended up in the bog.
Okay. And about the other, there was a woman that was found?
There was an Elling woman. So she was slightly younger, but still a woman. What is very special about her is that she had very long hair, like all the way down the navel. It was braided in a special way, very elaborate hairdo. And she is not as well preserved as Toloman, but her hair is very nicely preserved, and you can also see that at the Museum Silkeborg.
Okay. And do you have any other information on her, like how she died? Like that she has also a cord?
She also had
a
rope around her neck.
Okay.
So she died in the same way. So that's one of the common traits. Several of these spark bodies died by hanging. And then you have Grauballermann at Moskov Museum, who had his throat cut. So there are different ways. are you ready for a small game?
Yeah, yeah.
So unfortunately, this is the information board that's not ready. It will come up very soon, but the thing is that we want to find out when you're standing around. We want to find out who has the most in common with taller man. So we ask some questions, and then you have to see, how many times can you answer yes to this question.
Okay.
So the first question is, do you have short brown hair?
No.
No, I
Only have.
I think I have
You do.
because we know that taller man had short hair. So when we take off his cap, we can see, in some places it's very short, and in the longest hair are probably like four centimeters.
Okay.
So have you eaten porridge in the last day?
No.
No, me
I
neither.
don't think so.
But why we have the question is, as I told before, we know that he ate
Yeah.
porridge 12 to 24 hours before
Yeah. And it's very common today also.
Yeah. Have you had intestinal worms?
Not that I know of.
No. And the reason why we asked this question is because when we were looking at the colon content, we also found eggs of whipworm and tapeworm and moorworm. So he was infested by these different parasites, but that was very common. Even today, in certain countries, it is a problem with these intestinal parasites. But it was also back then in the Iron Age. So, for instance, whipworm and moorworm, he probably got those because of the, not as good hygiene, not so good sanitation in the Iron Age. So you get this kind of worms by eating infested food or drink. So that tells you something about the sanitation conditions. While
everything is a clue.
Yeah, while the eggs from the tapeworm suggest that he at some point eaten raw or uncooked meat, because that was infested by these tapeworm cysts. But again, in the Iron Age, you cooked your food in the fire and in pits and so on. So it's not really surprising that you could get these kind of parasites. But it's just, it's interesting to find these clues.
Yeah.
Then a question: have you ever broken a bone?
Also not.
I have broken several.
Oh,
so
okay.
2-0. Have you a scar under the soles of your feet?
No.
Okay, you're really not like tall man at all.
No, not at all. I only have brown hair in common. The only thing.
Have you had plantar warts?
Plantar warts, what is that?
Like these small things under your feet?
No, I don't think so.
Me neither.
I don't think
Okay, so we are not very much like taller man. When we opened this route, there were, I think there was we had 175 kids out here in the area trying all these things. And I think there was one teacher who could answer yes to all these.
Everything?
Yeah. So
well, but where does this question come from? The scars.
It's because we have found a scar beneath his foot. So we don't know how he got it.
Okay.
He was probably walking bare feet most of the time. So it's not surprising. But
okay. Were these type of things also found in the woman?
She's not as well preserved at all.
Okay.
So we can't see anything like that because most of it's mostly bones and then a little of her skin that's preserved, but it's completely different preservation. And then the plantar warts. I believe it's the oldest plantar warts that have been found so far.
Okay.
Belongs to taller man. So
wow.
Yeah, it's famous for that as well.
I mean, is that something that you actually want to be famous?
I don't know, but it's fun.
Not a stress anymore.
A fun fact, anyway.
Yeah. Okay. And you also mentioned something about a third body that was found here. What happened with that third body?
Okay, so Tolleman was found in 1950, and Ellingwoman was found in 1938. But the first bug body that was found actually in 1927. And there was this guy out in the bog somewhere out there digging peat, and he was very deep into the ground, so 3-4 meters, and there were thin walls holding back the water from the bog. And suddenly he finds something. It looks like some kind of hide from an animal, and he just throws it up on the side. And then he also finds some bones. And actually, he's very interested in this and wants to keep going. But suddenly they say, "Oh, you have to get up because, it's going to collapse." And he just gets up and it all collapses, so he can't get back to the area where he found these things. And then they kind of they place these things behind a shed sometime, and they were closing down for this season of peat cutting, and then they get back the next spring and find these things again, and suddenly they see that in this hide there are holes in it, and there are things that you can bind it together with. So this is not just an animal that died here. This is actually a cape.
Human-made.
Yeah, it's clothing, and bones. They find they were probably human ribs, but they keep them. And one day, the National Museum of Denmark, a person from there comes by, and they show him these things, but unfortunately he isn't interested, so nothing happens to this. So we don't have any evidence of this body anymore.
So it's still somewhere.
There might be some remains out there, yeah. But unfortunately we didn't get this body.
Yeah. Are you actively looking for things, or things just pop up out of, I don't know, excavations or some field work that someone's doing?
It depends. Sometimes we can do some research excavations, but we have to find some funding to do this, and we have to have a special project. And we are not going to to be excavating out here in the bog. It's too wet, and it's not that likely that we will actually find anything. So not for now, anyway.
Okay. And when you were preparing this route, did you already have all the information that you used here, or did some other story also appeared that you were not really counting on, or you found something else?
No, I think we had everything, but just had to look through the archives and find the stories. And then, of course, we got some new results. So, for instance, a few years ago, we got a new radiocarbon date of Toloman. So we know, and this is really amazing, we know that he died sometime between 405 and 380 BC. So it's within a time frame of only 24 years.
I don't really understand.
It is amazing.
I'm sorry.
It's really amazing that you can date him so accurately.
Okay.
So now, for instance, we know that he lived at the same time as Socrates. So while Socrates was walking around in the streets of Athens, a tall man was out here living in primitive houses, and probably being a farmer and stuff like that. So that's quite interesting when you can place him in a historical context as well.
Okay.
And what we really would like to do is also to try to redate Ellingwoman, to see how does she relate to Toloman in time. So when they sacrificed Toloman or sacrificed Ellingwoman, would they still be remembering the sacrifice of Toloman, or did the two persons know each other? There's so many questions that would be nice to find out.
that was it for this program, but stay tuned for the next one. In the meantime, don't forget to check our Facebook page, BURT, for updates on our schedules and programs. See you soon. And right now, how is the dating of the woman?
Slightly later, but it's very broad.
Okay. How broad is it?
From 200 and
something
to 350 or something like that.
Okay, so it's like maybe 100 something years in between. Was that the same with all men before?
Yeah, before. Yeah. It was a very broad date, but then we used some new methods and we modeled the date based on several different radiocarbon dates, and then we were just really lucky that we hit the calibration curve on a very steep point. It's a bit technical, but when you get the radiocarbon dates, you have to calibrate them to ordinary years.
Okay.
And you have a calibration curve, and if you're hitting a very flat part of the curve, then you will get a very broad date. But here we hit a very steep part of the curve, and you get a very narrow date. So we're just really lucky.
Okay. So I wanted to understand how smaller was the difference in between the past method that you used and the current one. But yeah, from 100 and something years to
150
24.
years or something to like 24, 25 years.
Yeah. Okay. And those 150, is it usually the margin?
It depends on where you hit the curve.
Okay, so every case is a special case. There's no general rules or something like this.